okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, so very quickly, the reason they call me ambassador is I was one of the U.S. ambassadors to the United Nations in New York. I dealt with the economic and social portfolio, but then after that, I was an assistant secretary of state for conflict and stabilization operations, which meant wars. So I worked in about 40 plus wars over the last 25 years. Most of the wars that you have heard about, but not necessarily ones that are going on right now. And I haven't succeeded. There's still quite a few of them are still going on. So this is not, the reason I wrote the book is that I felt that these things matter a great deal. The United States can actually help more than it has been. And I have seen it work. And I wanted to share those lessons with Americans and hopefully get people like you and your brothers and sisters and friends and parents more engaged to care more about this stuff. So, has anybody here been to any war-torn countries? Are you from, any of you from the Balkans, from Bosnia or Croatia, or you have relatives in any of these places? No? Yep.
I have relatives in Croatia.
Croatia. Okay. So, let's just do a little bit of history on that one war. What do you know about it?
Nothing.
Okay, that's fair. Anybody else wanted to know a little bit more? What's your first name?
Lock.
Locke?
Yeah.
Okay, anybody know about the Balkans War? It went on for a number of years. Does anybody else have any relatives or anything like that? No. Okay, basically there were three parties to the war and it went on, and the United States actually sent troops to it. So why don't we start with what's going on right now? What wars are you aware of right now? Instead, we have a.
Yeah, I got one.
So, one of you want to write this stuff down? One of you want to write? Will you write it down? Why don't you write it down as your classmates are talking? And then we'll just and then we're going to quickly see what are we doing. What's get a little bit about these wars. Okay? So here we go. We got some volunteers here. What word? Afghanistan, that's a good one. Okay? You don't have to go too high, go as high as it's comfortable. Because we're not going to fill the whole board. Okay, what other ones we have? Do you have one? Syria. Yeah, that's good enough. You can just start with that. Okay, good. This won't be a spelling bee. Syria is another one. What else? What else you have? That was, I mean, it could come back. Let's just put Balkans Wars. Balkans, B-A-L-K. Could come back, but it's mostly a peace. Yes? Korean War. Well, there's never been a signed peace agreement, but they're not fighting. But I guess you could say if there's no peace, there could still be a war. That's a good one. Okay. What else? Yes?
There's a drug war in South America.
Drug wars in South America. So, what would you say?
South America. I don't know.
Yeah, let's narrow it down a bit. How about Central America would be northern?
Yeah.
Okay, what about a country or two, a specific country or two? Where there's a lot of violence, but not necessarily war. Well, Colombia has got the Colombian War. They got a peace agreement. Put Colombia. There was a peace agreement there. What other ones? Yes. Puerto Rico, not so much a war, but a post hurricane disaster, and more of a natural disaster. Yeah. Sudan, good, excellent one.
Yes, I
The guys, so is there gender loyalty here? Yeah.
The one in Turkey.
Oh, the war in Turkey.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about that one.
It's a civil war in Turkey, and it seems to be a big problem.
So who's involved in it?
The government and people.
The Kurds. So maybe the Kurds, huh? So one group of people in Turkey. It's not officially a war, but let's put Turkey down. You got one?
Wasn't there one
What?
in
Liberia. There was a war in Liberia. Not so much right now. Let's put it down. Why not? Don't you hear about bombing and a whole bunch of stuff going on in an Arab country right now? Yes. Yemen. Like you guys want to give it another round? He's obviously the best seat in the house here. He must be
That's fine.
number one seat. Okay, so Yemen is a really good, it's a very, okay, let's get another really hot one right now. We'll get another hot one that's going on right now. Yeah.
There's not a war, there's a lot of violence.
Yeah. So Central America just got, Central America, whether it's El Salvador or Honduras, why do you think those people are leaving? Why those people why are these people coming from the country in the caravan? What's going on there? Yes.
Gang violence.
Okay, so let's put down Central America over here. And then we're going to talk about some of these things. We're only going to pick out a couple of these. Is there anything going on in Iraq?
Yeah.
So Iraq could be, the Iraq war is still kind of going on. But Central America is, so let's do this. Let's circle Afghanistan. Well, maybe here, use one of these other colors. Circle that one, circle Syria. Circle Sudan, Yemen, and Central America. Why don't we do that? Okay. So just for sake of conversation, just stay on Central America. So one reason they're leaving. Who said the gang wars? Did you say that? Okay. So one reason they're leaving Central America is because of the gang wars. So that would be what would be a general category? You call that violence? Yeah, violence. So it's violence. Yeah, so why don't we do a whole new column over here, sort of reasons that we have that people are leaving their homes, okay? So violence is one thing. What else? Yes?
Poverty.
Poverty, okay, good one. What else? Yes?
Like religious discrepancies,
So they make them don't be discriminated against?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So they, in particular, these places, many of the indigenous tribes, the local Indian tribes are picked on pretty consistently, pushed around, taken off their land, things taken away from them. Max just came back from Guatemala. He spent a year there, and so he was just saying that people think of official oppression as being sort of people thrown in jail, whatnot, but not necessarily having their land taken away and then being put on less fertile land where they can't make a living. So they're farming, they're making a living. The next day they're farming and they're not making a living because they've been put on less desirable land. Who got the desirable land? Somebody who maybe had a play with the local government or whatever. Okay. What are some other reasons that people leave home? Yeah.
Drugs.
Drugs, okay. So that ties to the violence issue a bit. Okay, so you think that's, yes, please.
More opportunities.
For what?
And more opportunities.
Okay, so they're looking for opportunity. They're searching for opportunity, yes.
natural disaster.
Natural disasters compound. So what happens? A hurricane comes through, an earthquake happens, they get a big storm and that moves them as well, yes.
Freedom. Freedom.
Yeah, they just want to be more free. They would like justice, some form of justice.
Really clear.
Yeah. So we put oppression up there. We put oppression. You got one? You're gonna have one soon. Okay, because I'm gonna call on you, so. Oh! Nobody gets a pass here, right? Because I know who's talking, right? Yes. I'm sorry? Yes, so violence and danger, yeah, good. Yes.
Epidemic or disease.
Diseases, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yes, silence.
This is okay, good.
Political differences.
Political differences, yeah. That's good. That's excellent. So they might not get expression, they might not be able to express their political differences too. Okay, we heard from Bia. Are you ready? Okay, tell me when you're ready. Ready for Bia? All right. So we're gonna keep a new list over here of the people who stopped to call. All right. So be thinking about things because okay. So now that we've got some of the causes, what are some of the things that, what I like to think of this list here as sort of a witch's brew, okay? It's always there. I mean, you could add religion to it. You could add, but you've heard people say, "Oh, that's a war because of religion, or because of tribal differences, or because of politics, or because of money." I tend to believe that when people start killing their neighbors, they generally have multiple reasons. It's not like one simple reason. It gets more complicated than that. And so I'd like to keep it in mind that it's a witch's brew, and generally it's a male coven of witches who are kind of stirring the second, and they're using whatever they can, and they're throwing whatever they can into the mix as well. So that's what causes these things. What are some of the results? We've talked about war, obviously, but what are some of them? Why don't we go for another color and say, okay, what are some of the things that result from these conditions? What do you see? I mean, you've already kind of answered this question, but what are some things that happen when these things are all in play? Yeah, so you see, we got refugees. Yep. Yeah, so you got high mortality rates, a lot of casualties. Okay, now I'm going to go to the first rounders. You've already spoken once, right? So we're good for a minute. For now. One second, I'll hold you as a reserve. Yes?
This is just to get to maybe like an economic class.
Do they do what?
An economic class.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, so what ends up happening economically? So the economy crashes, sure, because people are leaving good. Okay, an economic crash, is that what you said? Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you. You see these hearing aids?
Oh, yeah.
I use them. I need them to be a little better. Okay. You guys ready to go?
Sure. Maybe the government collapses.
Government's collapse. One of the reasons I helped to build 2 offices in the U.S. government. And one of the things that both of my offices did is they got on problems much faster than other offices. Why? Because a bad night at the saloon, you could be on your 3rd government. That's not good, right? You've got all your plans in place, and then something goes awry, and changes in governments happen all the time. So good. All right. How are we doing? Who's ready to go? Yes?
War.
What?
War.
War. Yep, war. Okay, so let's ask a couple of other questions, and then I'm going to let you ask me some questions. Has everybody had a chance to speak? Anybody feeling like they're left out?
I
have to say.
Good.
I was gonna say what you said.
What?
I don't have anything.
You have anything more to say? Okay.
Yeah.
But you will have a question in a few minutes. Okay, so let's just talk about refugees for a second. How many refugees are there in the world right now, do you think? Now we're going to do an experiment. Everybody come up with your own number. Okay, come up with your own number. I'm going to give you a hint. It's more than 1 million and it's less than 100 million. Okay, so we'll keep you. I'm going to keep you on the game. Okay, now there's a rule. There's a game. If you all know what the wisdom of the crowds is? Have you heard of the wisdom of the crowds? The wisdom of the crowds suggests that the answer that you all come up with as a class, in other words, your answer, added together, will be more accurate than any one person's answer. Do you think that's possible? So I want you all to think of your number, okay? Everybody come up with your number and don't change it, and you're going to write down all the numbers, okay? Just very quickly. Do you all have a number between?
Yes, sir.
Now, this is going to be refugees and internally displaced people who have left their homes. There's a widely accepted number that is being used now in the world for this. Okay, you all have a number?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to start with you. 43, 45, 50, 37, 17, 86,
11 and 7.
37.
37,
Yeah. 72.
72,
67.
66.
52.
65.
60,
90.
70. Okay, Can you average that out? Do we have a math?
No.
Do we have a math? Can you
It's
say?
the 90.
Oh, I see, 11.7.
You missed the 90.
It's the 90. Okay, can you add them all up?
Yep, Mary's.
Okay, while she's doing that,
She said 15, not 17. No, I said 17.
close enough, close enough.
Top 17
Add 50.
is a 15. Yes.
Okay, but you know what? Let's just add them up and see where we
No,
are.
it's 17.
Okay, actually, don't worry about it. What's
No, it's
your name?
37.
Can we make it 11 on 11 and 1?
Okay, Devin, so we're gonna let Mary add them up, so we don't have to do. Okay, now I've got some specific questions for you. We're gonna find out the answer in a minute. Where do you think, what are the biggest host countries in the world for refugees? What do you think are the top 3 host countries? Do you have any room, can you get over here?
Germany.
Okay, who's number 1? Who's?
Germany.
Germany. Okay, there's a guess. What's, give me some more quick guesses, let's go.
France.
France. Okay, yes, Italy. Okay,
No. All 3 of my guesses.
not Hungary, that's a good answer, but that's correct, but not, tell me where the big ones are. I'm gonna give you a hint here, okay? It's gonna change your answers totally. The biggest host countries are the neighboring countries to
Syria.
wars.
yeah.
Okay? So let's just, for example, start on Syria. Who lives next door to Syria? No, not so much.
Israel.
Not so much. I don't think Afghanistan. Okay. So what are some of the surrounding countries to
Turkey.
Israel.
Turkey?
Saudi Arabia.
Turkey is definitely an answer.
I thought Turkey was having
Yes.
more.
Jordan is definitely an answer. We'll give you one more answer.
Israel.
No. Israel doesn't, it doesn't take as many people for some other reason. What would be one other country right there that takes a lot of, what'd you say?
Iraq.
Let's take something, it's not the answer to this one.
Kazakhstan.
How about Lebanon? Yes, Lebanon? Okay. Okay, one more round of questions. So these are 3 of the biggest host countries on earth, okay? Now, let's try this war here. What are the neighbors of Afghanistan?
Pakistan.
Pakistan, big host country, huge country.
Turkmenistan.
Kazakhstan is
Okay. All right. Okay, so your answer is these countries take very, very few refugees. Do you think the United States takes lots of refugees?
No.
Yeah, that's correct. We have, though. Have we taken refugees in the past?
Yes.
Yeah, like, what was the biggest single group of refugees we've taken probably in the last 30, 40 years? Does anybody know? Anybody? Yeah?
World War II refugees.
World War II
Past 30
refugees?
years.
Some, but that would be even before the Vietnam War. We took lots of Vietnamese. Is there a big Southeast Asian community in Seattle?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's the answer. All right. Okay. That's all the questions I want to ask you. So now I'm going to take your questions. Did we do the whistle of the crowds? Do we have the answer?
64 million.
64 million. Anybody got, is there 64 million up there? 66,
I said
65.
65.
So pretty close. That 64 million is just about, you said 65?
Yes.
Good. You're going to get to come up here and answer the next 3 questions.
Good stuff, Kai.
You're that smart. So 64 million is very close. The number is generally somewhere between 60 and 70 million. Pretty good.
Good stuff, Kai.
Pretty good.
we got 65.
Not 65 exactly. But that's internally displaced people as well as refugees. What is an internally displaced person, do you think? That's as opposed to a refugee. Right. Left their home, exactly right. Good definition. You want to give her an ovation?
Yeah, Lindsay! Very good stuff, Olivia.
Thank you. I didn't see that. Thank you.
Twinkle toes.
Okay. All right, well, thank you all. Okay, let's, I'm ready to take your questions about the stuff. We put some of the subjects in there. Yeah, please.
What got you into your profession?
Good question. So, I got into it kind of later in my career than most people, because I lived in Maine, and I worked in politics and in government, and then I had my own business. But my father had been a diplomat, and my parents were basically diplomats, and we had lived in Argentina, where I was born, in Spain, and Bolivia, Dominican Republic, so I always had this interest. But I was in Maine, which was a little bit remote from the center of gravity is, guess where? For this business today. Yeah, but even more Washington, probably. New York, it's sort of New York and Washington. And there I was up in Maine, and so it was a little tricky to figure out how to get into this stuff, even though it had been a lifelong interest of mine. But so I kind of got lucky, and I got an opportunity because the guy who was running the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is our primary development agency, knew that he wanted to do something that the bureaucracy would try to kill, so he needed a kind of an outsider to do it. And he met me, and he thought I might be the type of person who could make that happen. So I got a very lucky break, and then I did well at it. We had some successes, so that sort of got me going. Then people, when they were looking for somebody to do something that was unusual, they'd say, well, that guy did that. So then I got, but I really started when I was, let's see, over about 45 years old. So that was unusual. Because most people do this stuff earlier. They work like Max did. They go to Guatemala. They work for a nonprofit there. They get to know a country. They enjoy the work. And actually, Mary's son was a Peace Corps volunteer, and also in another part of the world, in Kyrgyzstan. And so that's another way. That's a more familiar way. Okay. Yes. Did that answer your question? Yeah.
So, how many refugees do you think we should be accepting to America, and how should we handle the large amount of refugees?
So the United States, for a number of years, was the leading country for taking refugees who had already gone to another country. So we were the #1 destination for taking people who had already left their country and landed in an intermediate country. And we were taking at that point about 75,000 a year, which would make maybe put like 1 or 2 in every high school in America. Would be that's not a lot of people in a country of 300 million. Now a country like Lebanon has 1 million or 2 million refugees in a country that only has 6 million people. So it's like 1/4 of their population is refugees. If we took tons of refugees, it would never be that kind of number. So the number that we have right now barely shows up in our consciousness, even though it's talked about a great deal in this country as if we're going to be overrun by this. Now, we do obviously have migrants and immigrants as well, and that's different than refugees. What does it take to be a refugee? Why would you be called a refugee? Let me see if somebody else got it. Yes.
You're like half building or forced building.
Yeah, you've got it. You're suffering a threat to your existence. That's what makes you a refugee. So, and what about a migrant? What makes a migrant? Well, yeah, sort of by choice, but oftentimes you're not forced to leave. You're not going to be killed. But you may be just looking for economic opportunity. So, are there times that a country like the United States takes somebody who could be a refugee and we call them a migrant? Do you think?
Yeah.
What would be? When might that have happened? So this is, yeah. That's a good answer, guys.
Good stuff, Mira.
Exactly right. So suddenly a whole bunch of Indians are getting killed in Guatemala, and we say, oh, the fact that 1 million Guatemalans show up on our border, oh, they must be economic migrants. But everybody in the town just got killed. It's like, why do we say that? Because they have certain rights under international law as refugees, and they don't have those rights as migrants. So it allows us to treat them pretty much any way we want, send them back wherever we want, the rest of it. But it's not actually, we're not actually abiding by international standards. We're sort of playing the rules our own way. Okay. Next question. Yes. I'm sorry, I've got a confession to hear you.
Do you have like a particular story or experience with refugees that stands out?
Very good question. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, I got lots. But so I was the Deputy High Commissioner for Refugees, which is the #2 job in the United Nations Refugee Agency. And I went down to Sierra Leone, and there were, in an area of Sierra Leone, there were 300,000 refugees in that one little area of Sierra Leone. So if you look at Sierra Leone up here, there's an area of it called the Parrot's Beak. This is Guinea. This little piece of Guinea right here is where the 300,000 Sierra Leone refugees were. Can you see that? But it's called the Parrot's Beak. And there were some from Liberia, because there was a war going on in Liberia, and there were a ton from Sierra Leone because a lot of people were getting killed. So we were running refugee camps there. The UN was running refugee camps there. It was the only place that a Sierra Leonean teacher could get paid was in a UN refugee camp. So the teachers' union was in operation there, but not inside the country. So we got there, and just to show you how some of these people are trying to protect their own children or whatever. I visited the 3rd refugee camp of the day, and it was mostly Liberia. And the guy who worked for me, who was from Sudan, he said, Rick, I'd like to take you into the clinic here for somebody who wants to meet you. And there was a woman there who had just had triplets that morning. And the babies looked about the size of this cup. I mean, they were tiny. And she had decided to name one of her babies. She had a boy and 2 little girls. She decided to name her little boy Martin. Now, she didn't know me from the man in the moon, right? So it wasn't like she picked Abraham Lincoln's name or George Washington. But why do you think she picked my name? She just wanted to give that little boy every chance she got. She named him after this visiting guy from Geneva. Maybe the kid would get extra careful. So that's pretty clever thought. It's pretty impressive. So there are lots of things that happen. Quite literally.
Andrew, I thought you said you were going to go.
Okay, who's got the next question? Yes. We were representatives of the United States. So we were kids in a school like this. I went to local schools in Spain. And so we ended up being like little representatives of the United States. And I thought it was, we were trying to represent a country that was caring and that was making a positive difference. So that felt like a real privilege. Something I liked. So I thought it was a positive association. And this thing come back and ask the second part of the question. How about this side of the room? I want you to answer the last one. Yes.
How many
Yes, they do say.
How many wars?
what do you want?
Well, I've worked in over 40 wars.
he has to like run around.
Well, most of these. I did not work on Korea. I've worked in almost all these. I have not worked in Yemen. Worked in several countries in Central America. So that gives you virtually every part of the world. I've worked in almost every part of the world. Because there are either local wars or. But for example, I have one of the wars that's getting better right now is Ethiopia and Eritrea. They went to war. Several tens of thousands of people, over 100,000 people, were killed in that war. And now Ethiopia's got a new prime minister, and he's apologized to Eritrea. He's visited them, and it looks as if peace is going to break out. Completely unexpected. Pretty spectacular. Nice, kind of good news. Yes.
What is the average age of
Most refugees are women and children. So I don't know the average age, but I would guess that it would probably be under 25, because so many children are involved. So it's probably be under 18. And the other thing about many of these countries is they're demographically very young. So 50% of the population is under 20, which would not be true in our country or any developed country. Like Europe has got they're aging countries. Okay, who's left here? You guys have questions? You got any unique ones? That's the deal. Yeah, you got to come up with questions, all right? Should I come back to you or do I throw it out?
How many different places have you lived in with this job?
So not that many. I mean, I'm mostly a visitor, but I've lived in Argentina, Spain, Bolivia, Dominican Republic, Mexico with my family, and then with my parents, and then I lived in Switzerland with my own family. We'll come back to these guys, all right? Okay, who's left? Yeah.
We were reading a while ago saying how a lot of the strategies we've tried for like refugees don't really work. Is there anything that has worked in the past that inspired you or anything?
Yeah. One thing that I think works really well that I've tried to use in most of my jobs is actually television programming. And so in Nigeria, we helped a local Nigerian movie director who's kind of like this, he'd be like the Steven Spielberg of Nigerian movie making. Nigerian movie making is called Nollywood, and it's the biggest in Africa, and it reaches all the way to Pakistan, so it's pretty big. It's got a lot of audiences. So this guy, his name is Jetta Amata, but he's called Superstar Director Jetta Amata. That's his name, Superstar Director Jetta Amata, and everybody calls him that. So we thought that there was something going on in Nigeria that we were very concerned about, and that is there was a national narrative that violence pays. That's not very good. It doesn't help you solve problems without violence, right? If you can always turn to violence, solve your problem. So we thought we wanted to take that on, and the best way to do it would be through Nigerian television. And Jetta Amata and some of his friends came up with a reality show called Dawn in the Creeks. You can go home, you guys, when you're able to go back on your computers, one or two of you may want to do this. But more do, that's fine too. You can look up Dawn in the Creeks. And this is, the creeks are an area of Nigeria where there was a ton of violence. It's the oil-rich area of Nigeria which pays for everything, basically. The whole government is funded by oil. And so what he did is he created a 13-week reality television series that picked youths, mostly older than you guys, from 3 villages, and they learned how to make movies, and they each made a movie on how to solve a problem in their community without violence. Then the movie went on the red carpet in the biggest city, in Lagos, And it was shown on all of Nigerian television, along with a 13-week series showing how they were picked, how they started to decide what the movie storyline was going to be, how they're making the movie, and then the final piece. And then there were town hall meetings around the movies where people would talk about the movies. So suddenly you get a country of 165 million people. It's hard. How do you reach 165 million people? One way to do it is through television. And we got that particular show ended up being on every major network in Nigeria for 13 weeks, which meant you could almost watch nothing but Don and the Creeks. And all the advertising for it, and the talk shows about it, and the social media, and the Occupy Nigeria movement, all of these people came together around this Don and the Creeks. So suddenly you had a national dialogue around violence as a way to solve problems in Nigeria. So the United States, we helped make it possible. We spent about $5 million, which is a pretty efficient way to reach 165 million people and get an idea across. So I liked it.
One question for you. Syria with half a million dead Syrians and 4 or 5 million refugees. If you could wind the clock back, let's say this were possible, 8 or 10 years, what alternative, what choices did the American government have? What could have, do you think there was an option that we could have taken that might have averted it? The reason I'm asking is if it occurred again, what would we do different to not have something like that?
So in my book, which you're all going to buy for your parents and for yourselves for Christmas, if not Halloween, I actually offer a couple of ideas, but I offer them with genuine humility, because who knows if they would work. So I basically had two ideas that I felt we could pursue. One was what I called an assertive humanitarianism, that I believe that we should have enforced the international humanitarian rules with an airlift into Aleppo at a time when humanitarian goods were not being distributed there because the host government was preventing them from getting out to hostile areas. And I believe we did that in Berlin, we did it in Sarajevo, and we could have found a way to do it, even though the government opposed it.